Alright guys, James here from Athleticon, and we're going to go through how to use bands properly on the Cybex hack squat here at Athleticon. So the first thing to know about bands is the ideal setup with a band is to try and make the movement equally as hard throughout. So what we mean by that is with the squat, for instance, very easy at the top, very hard at the bottom. What we'd like to try and do is make it as hard or close to as hard at the top as we do at the bottom. And that's where our bands come in. So the bands can actually make the movement harder, which is paradoxical, as people think pop bands on it makes it easier. Say you can hack squat 100 kilos with no bands, you couldn't do 105, you couldn't do 101. If we were to put, say, two bands on, which might give us 30 kilograms of help at the bottom when it's fully stretched, just for throwing a number out there. And so now if we kept the 100 on there, it would be 70 at the bottom, 100 at the top. Well, what we actually do is we put 130 on there. So I've got our 130 on there instead of 100, 30 kilos of band help. It's now that 100 at the bottom. And then as we come up and the joints start to stack, and we're incredibly strong in that sort of top quarter part of the squat, we're now using 130. And so, in a sense, it makes the movement harder. And you can see how I was mentioning earlier, it makes it equally hard throughout the movement. It'll never be as hard at the top as it is at the bottom, even with bands, no matter how much extra weight you put on, just because we're so incredibly strong in that top quarter part of the squat. As we come up off the bottom, and the movement starts to get easier naturally, because the joints are starting to stack a little bit, then the bands start to turn off, and boom, you hit with that extra weight that you're not normally used to. The ideal setup would be to have the band being a little bit loose at the top, and obviously stretching at the bottom. You hook it onto the carabiners that are set up here. There'll be a couple of carabiners on there, and so if you're really short, you might want to hook it on to the bottom of the two carabiners. If you're not quite that short, you hook it onto one. You see there's a little bit of slack there now at that close to top position, which is what we want. And of course, they will stretch as we get to the bottom. And so these carabiners will be set up here all the time, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but it's just going to be a little bit better than just looping them randomly over a couple of things. I mean, I'm 6'4", 6'5", there's a lot of girls here hack squatting that are going to be 5'3" or less. We can't all be using bands from the same position. So this will just make it a little bit more efficient, and probably, well, I'm quite confident you'll get better results out of it. At the end of the day, the banding on the hack squat is not a necessity. Some incredible quads have been built without bands on a hack squat, but it's a great way to push through a plateau. So for instance, if you're, of course we look at nutrition, we look at stress, we look at sleep as well, but all things being equal, if your hack squat has plateaued for a while, try reverse banding it, exposing part of the movement to that extra bit of weight, so having that, say, 130 instead of 100 for that top portion of the movement. And I think you'll find if you do a block, say a 4 to 6 week block of doing the reverse bands instead of bandless, when you come back to doing the normal hack squats, may take a session or two just to get used to not having the bands, but I think you'll find in virtue of that extra bit of exposure, you've had the heavy weight, you'll be better off for it. So again, just think of bands as a tool to try and smooth out the resistance curve or the strength profile to make it as close to equally as hard throughout the movement, as opposed to obscenely hard at the bottom and very easy at the top. So I hope that helps. Anything doesn't make sense, please let me know, and look forward to seeing you doing your banded hack squats at Athleticon. Ciao.